Welcome to EIPIP Meeting 99. This is issue number 310 on Eat Cat Herders EIPIP GitHub repository. This seems to be a pretty short agenda. In fact, we have a few items to be discussed with respect to process. Then we will discuss any open issues in PR, call for input, and any other discussion continued from the past meetings. We'll quickly take a look at the EIPS Insight for the report of January 2024, and we'll get to know about editing office hour. To begin with the first item, and I see a comment here in the chat by Sam. No, Sam, we did not hear you. Maybe if you would like to rejoin or check your microphone. Very well. So the first item listed here is RIP process documentation. It was on the suggestion of RIP working group, but I don't see any of the member on the call today. I wonder if anyone has any update to be shared, but I have got one update. There is one RIP, which is RIP number 7212, has now been moved to final. So it will be really interesting to learn about the process they would like to follow and what are the type categories they would like to consider, because I can see here the category mentioned is good. Yeah, if anyone has any update or any thought about RIP process, feel free to share.
I briefly talked to Dogan, sorry, Ulash, who is the guy who opened this one, and he made it sound like the roll up, like a lot of the decisions, it's sort of synchronous, like meeting based, and that they're doing something sort of on the all core devs model, but it sounded like he couldn't tell me who to talk to about the more formal stuff. I couldn't understand if it was who was the person who wanted to be harassed about process per se. Like maybe like client knows. Oh, sorry, I was putting them on the spot. Maybe we should start over.
All right. Just for some context here, we were discussing the RIP process documentation, and it seems we won't get an opportunity to talk to the author of RIP 7212, but we are still unclear about the decision-making and process part. We were hoping to have someone from the working group to join this EIPIP meeting to maybe share about the process. But yeah, anyone else on the call, if you have thoughts, ideas, or any information collected, please feel free to share. I have also left a few comments on one of the all core dev agenda. After that, we were reached out by the team, but I will try to follow up with the team again and try to get them in the next meeting if possible. So if there's nothing further on this one, perhaps we can move on to a web page rendering to include EIPs, ERCs, and RIPs. I am not sure what is the progress on that side, but yeah, if there are any.
Hey,
yes,
I'm working now. Okay, cool. So I've been making a little bit of progress on the EIPS working group stuff. So EIP review bot is now running on my repositories, and the rendering is done for that. Also, I'm not sure if anybody else is aware, but PandaPip has stepped down as an editor for the time being. Just wanted to make an announcement about that. But yeah, so I'm working on EIPIP Review Bot for working groups, and yeah, you can follow along my development over at github.com/eeps-wg.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Sam, for that. Sam, whenever you think we are in a position to maybe have a small demo and we can publicly announce that, that would be really nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we're going to have to decide if we want to adopt that structure. So I think that's probably something we should do before we announce publicly. How do people feel about that in general? Do we want to go down the working groups road?
Yeah, I feel like this could be a good time to discuss that because we do not have a ton of items on the agenda and we probably have most of the editors on the call.
Can you put a link in the chat to any document that I can skim quickly?
Yeah, it's the same one that we've been discussing with the working groups having their own like members and everything. I'll find the HackMD.
Thank you.
I have a question here. If I understand correctly, the present eips.ethereum.org also rendered the ERCS. I mean, I had someone working on rendering of RIPS, but I do not see any success over there. I'm wondering if people still want to go that route or if we want to switch and move all together to the working group part.
So I'm in favor of having RIPs be a working group so they'd inherit the same rendering stack, but I don't know how everybody else feels.
How do they feel about it?
I've talked briefly to Ansgar about it, and he's pretty interested in making it a working group.
In which case I'm all for it.
Yeah, Ulash seemed to like the general idea, but it seemed like he was hearing about it for the first time. I don't think he had like a clear definition of what being a working group meant and didn't know how to, check if I was asking him to commit to more than he was already committing to in other conversations. So I think my action item was to send him links to what becoming a working group meant. Maybe, I don't know if that's similar to the vibe you got from Ansgar. Ulash is, I think, just an active member. I don't think he signed up for any sort of formal duties. He's just the guy who wrote the RIP mentioned above.
As far as like formal responsibilities for work, like what is like a quick summary of what it means to be a working group. It means you're kind of subject to the similar rules that we have for EIPs now. So like formal external link policy, you have to use Markdown, a few other things, and you'll have to use our repository structure. And then on the governance side, you have to like write a document describing your policies. But other than that, there's not too much overhead.
Yeah, the first thing Ulash told me was, I said, "Hey, do you guys want to be a working group the way All Core Dev says?" And he was like, "Oh, you mean like getting a repo like they have?" Yeah, I think we're planning to do that. So on that level, I don't think there's any conflict. I think they're okay with that.
Yeah, I guess reviewing PRs would be the other thing. People would have to review PRs.
They'd have to review PRs, but they already have their regular calls. So I think it's sort of logical to be like, at each call, we just review, check in on our repo. Seems like they are fine with it. It's the same, compatible with their structure.
I can predict that there'll be conflicts over external link policy.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And, obviously working groups can define their own kind of exceptions and however they want to approach it. There's a lot of freedom. So
Okay. So pretty much if an author of an RIP wants to do a link that we wouldn't like, it's more up to the working group. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
I think so, yeah. Like our goal, like our mission as EIP editors is to make sure things are, durable for the lifetime of Ethereum. And yeah, I think we can probably come to reasonable compromises with working groups on the specific like rules they want to use.
Okay. An easy one is simply to push it as far down the pipeline as we can. So it doesn't prevent drafts from going in, but by the time you get to final, these things have been resolved. It also gives the author time to find a better source for the link, but still have something to link to now so that people reading the proposal have something that they can read. E.g., you might have the link that's only to the author's web page, and it might take some doing to find a better link. But during draft phase, even review, the author could want the link there because that's the only link that he has to explain the concept that needs explaining or to back up the motivation or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I would really appreciate the users and whoever are involved with the RIP process right now. Like, definitely, it's being discussed in the meeting and being pushed. PRs are being merged. One or more of the members may either document those things so a community may be able to refer to, or maybe join our meeting and share their thoughts, and we can be aware of it and kind of help whoever are new and would like to document a new RIP. You can definitely send them towards the RIP Discord channel that is available on ETH R&D. But generally speaking, it will be a good idea to have proper documentation around, because I know at this point the GitHub repository is also like in very early stages, and we do not even have the name of editors listed over there. So it will be really nice to have something documented there. All right, Sam, just to be sure, like, would it be possible for you to maybe provide a demo by the next meeting, even if we are not formally announcing that? That will perhaps give people to have better look of it and maybe compare and see if we would
Sure.
like to.
So
Yeah.
to be clear, everything is working except for EIP Review Bot and EIPW. You can actually see it all live right now. Like the webpage rendering and all of that.
Would it be possible for you to maybe pull up?
Sure.
Yeah, on your screen. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. There we go. So it's pretty much the same as before. Yeah. I don't have RIPs just because they don't have a repo yet, but web page is here and it's all rendered from separate repositories. It's rendered using Zola instead of Jekyll. Basically exactly the same. Yeah, go ahead.
What does this governance mean here? Like, I can understand core ERC wallet and yeah.
Yeah, so this is the working group for defining the EIP's process itself. So this has things like our external links, the EIP ERC repository split, our handbook. Yeah, so this is kind of like the meta category.
Right, but if I understand correctly, it's not collecting all meta, but some of them. So how do we pick it? Like, is there any code defined for it, or do we need to select these proposals manually?
So all meta EIPs that exist today are moved into core, except for a handwritten list, because surprisingly, most meta EIPs are hard fork descriptions and not governance documents.
That's right. And I'm wondering why we are seeing ERC EIP repo split here and not in the core.
Oh, because this is a governance related, like splitting the repositories is a governance thing.
Should hard fork sort of project management coordination documents be informational technically, or was meta the right way to designate those in the first place?
So meta was originally like a category describing other EIPs, and it was meta because it was just a list of the other EIPs that were in the hard fork. But now there is no meta because it's kind of ambiguous. So there's governance, which is for the EIP process itself, and then there's core for hard fork organization and stuff. So yeah.
So just to understand it better, we are not going by the type and category, but we are going by selecting which will be the best suited for the working group.
Exactly. So instead of it being like a type and category, you'll have a working group, and then each working group, if they want, can have categories like core. There's more in here if I go all the way down. Yeah. So for example, the core working group has both core EIPs and networking EIPs as subcategories. But that would be up to the working groups to define how they want to organize stuff.
And maybe one other related question. I'm sorry, I'm asking so many questions. One other related question here, like, do we have a list of, or should we maintain this list somewhere, that who are the participants of respective working group? Can we maybe provide some placeholder in this website so people can know that if I have question with respect to this particular working group, I can perhaps reach out to these editors or users?
Until we officially launch it, like this is just my playground. There's nothing here that's permanent. I regularly erase it and start over. So I don't know if it would be worthwhile, but there are if we go into the actual repositories, so there is like the same kind of YAML file that lists the members of the working group and EIP editors. So that's going to be very similar to what we have today.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I find it good. I mean, I feel like it is really good if we can add perhaps a little bit more information about the people whom we should be reaching out to. For example, to understand what are their thoughts about just they want to categorize core networking and how they want to put it. Otherwise, it looks good and it would be a good way to share proposals with respect to working group. I wonder if anyone else has any other question.
I was just going to plus one and say that the working group breakdown as opposed to category or type breakdown, like it like adds another category that loosely maps to category and type, but like there's very good reasons for needing a third category. It would be more legible if it was part of a bigger socialization of the concept of the working group. And one way of doing that, like Pooja mentioned, like if when you click on a working group, the color of the site changes, or a
Yeah.
contact name appears, or like it's sort of some sort of UX feature flagging that you're like entering a different zone of authority and there's like a different contact person, right? Like that could be at the level of display, that could be hidden from the level of display but obvious in other contexts. Maybe when you go to the repo, it's at the top of the first readme in the root directory. Maybe wherever wherever it happens, I do think it's good to have some sort of nudge that like, this is a a different zone, a different something.
Okay, so you'd like to see
Maybe
more of an indication of like that you're in a different part of the website, or
kind of, yeah. Like I do think, I mean, I think Pooja's instincts are right here, that the average user won't care much about differences of governance, but they'll be very thankful if they know there's a different person to tag on GitHub, or a different sort of contact endpoint, whether that's an email or a GitHub name or what. But something that sort of signals it's a different department or a different workflow, something like that.
okay.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
I'm trying to
so
agree, but also
or you-
generalize at the same time. Like maybe first idea probably best idea, but thinking more generally, the working group as a concept is sort of only known to the people on this call and the people involved with moving repos. So it might be good to think of the socialization of the concept as a project worth coordinating, like pin a message on ETH Magicians. Maybe I was thinking about maybe working groups could each have categories on ETH Magicians, and whoever curates that category might be the same person you contact if they're, you see what I'm saying? Like a front door for each working group might be good.
Or, I mean, there is another way one can sort of allow them the freedom to render any way they want while adhering to the checks that we would want is in terms of social web tags. So they can basically, right now, our linters expect a certain format, and we can basically throw all of that and allow them to have any rendering format they want. And then basically with the social tags, they would have to match the categories that we have in our linter rules. And using that, maybe, it is possible to give the freedom to working groups to render in any way they want.
is that something potential working groups want? Like they said they don't want to necessarily use Markdown, and they don't want to use like our pull request bot. They want to do their own thing entirely.
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking if this is a real issue that they want their own rendering formats, and so maybe this is a way to allow them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think at first we should probably provide just like an out of the box solution. And if somebody wants to do something crazy, then I don't see why we couldn't let them.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
I mean, just
so
with the intent of allowing them the freedom to do that will solve away a lot of the urges that people get when they are restricted. So if you just say that you're allowed, and we will be able to again, we will be able to assess your page based upon, for example, social tags, then I mean, most of the issues that they would have for fitting into a certain format we want them to, those would go away. I mean, even if they don't end up doing anything, but still the illusion of the freedom basically takes away a lot of resistance.
I find this generally as a very good idea. To be very honest, from my side, I would love to see no change in header or maybe a unified header across all working groups. Data analytics could be easier for individual projects, infrastructure projects around EIPs. But obviously, it would depend
That-
on working groups. So, yeah.
That could still happen, Pooja, in the sense that when we process their markdowns and we look for our social tags, then we can basically
Mhm.
process and format those tags on the top of the page. So it would still be possible, and we still can sort of allow them the rendering format they want.
That would be awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Sam. This seems like a good progress towards including all proposals, including RAPS as well, along with ERCS and other working group that we can see here. Hopefully, we'll get to collect some input from other editors as well who are not here on the call today to maybe decide on if we want to go ahead with this format and merge it as a part of eips.ethereum.org. Any final comments before we move on to the next one?
My only
Very
my
well.
only my only thought would be, could we ask Unskar or Ulash or someone involved with RIPs to come to the next meeting?
I mean, we can definitely tag members on EIP editors channel on ETH R&D and let them know about the next meeting date in advance and perhaps hope for one of the representative to join.
Cool. Yeah, I think it might just help, because then it would double as the walkthrough on the next meeting would also double as onboarding if they want to do it, right? Like it would be a I don't know,
Absolutely.
like sort of a subtle way of nudging them, tricking them into saying yes on the call.
All right. All right, moving ahead to the next item, which is about to discuss open issues and PRs and other topics. I see in the chat, Sam has already given a thumbs up to the PR number 213, which is about ERs updating an ERC 1363. This was also requested by one of the users in the comment. I wonder any editor has any different thought. Or if all of them are okay to get it. So I see one more thumbs up. Very well. We can perhaps merge this PR unless that any editor may add any further comment suggesting they are not open to merge this one. The next one here is call for inputs. I have listed two new call for input. Number is 306 and 308. Sam, if you would like to maybe take a few minutes and talk about these call for inputs. The deadlines for both of them are February 7th and February 8th, respectively.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about them. So 306 is a backlink kind of proposal. So let's say I'm working on an extension for ERC 20. In my document, I'd be able to say extends 20 in the preamble. kind of giving an official symbol or like backlink to the thing I'm extending. And then on ERC20, there would be a list of all of the proposals that claim to extend ERC20. And that would be handled by the rendering infrastructure. So there'd be no change to the actual text of ERC20 to make that work.
Editors, if you have not added your input for this particular issue, please feel free to add it on or before February 7th, so we can have a decision and yeah, may be able to move forward or just close it.
I have added the input, and my apprehension is the same that I have added over there, that it can become as a spam vector or another vector where we have to judge whether we can allow a new EIP to say that it supersedes or updates a particular old EIP.
Maybe the 6,000 ERCs for ERC20 extensions is a good concrete case for discussing that, because without having a way to, without marking each as an extension of ERC20, we still get a lot of them. do you think there would be more of them if they could mark themselves as an extension of ERC20?
I mean, if on that particular EIP or ERC page, we show that it extends, for example, ERC20, then it's fine. I mean, because those tags are not getting into ERC20 EIP page, and a person who is looking at that particular EIP page, for that it is a relevant information, and a backlink to ERC20 is useful. But yeah, I would basically hesitate to sort of pop these links on ERC20 page.
I mean, I mean, I guess my thought was, in the case of extension, later documents extending, that's a pretty good argument against forward links. But in the case of informational updates, hey, I want to rewrite the security considerations, same author updating a final EIP with a new X section or more examples or something, there a forward link is really helpful, because you want everyone who sees the original to see the update. And for me, the utility of having update EIPs being more satisfactory to the cranky people trying to update their final EIPs is a good that outweighs the bad of ERC20 having a spammy forward link section. You know, like I think it's a pretty minor nuisance to have ERC20 have a 200 forward links, whereas I think it's a pretty major benefit to have updates be seen more. I think in all the threads where people are trying to patch final EIPs, the recommendation is we'll just open a new informational, and every time they're like, but no one sees it. to me, that's the way
in the structured groups, like core devs, right, where the core devs adopt an EIP which supersedes the previous EIP. It's very easy to make a decision, right, that yes, this has been adopted. But for example, for ERC, where the standard is more decentralized and there is no community which is basically saying that, also a community can't definitively say that, okay, this ERC interface is better, right? So in that manner, how will you do that? Maybe you can just have a link that says that, okay, there are extensions to this particular ERC, and you click, and then it does a search kind of a thing, shows you a list. Maybe that can work.
Right. I think listing everything that claims to supersede isn't that harmful a harm. Like if there's too many links in that section, oh well, there's too many links in that section.
So maybe what we need to move
yeah.
this forward is like showing a UI of what it might look like to have these forward links in the case that they're very spammy. So like how bad would it look to have 400 forward links off ERC20?
Yes. And that's also an argument for you know, that the precedent from IETF is structured working groups, like you're saying, so that applies better in some categories than others because there's some external curation. And B, there's two categories. There's replaces, supersedes, and there's extends. Here, the extension category of ERC20 would have 400 in it because all the ERCs with NFT in the title are assuming the basic ERC20 interface and adding more functions or whatever. So
That's kind of like our requires header now.
yeah, even just displaying requires. If people are using requires properly already, if the corpus of documents already has a lot of them filling out requires, then you could just maybe, to your point that it might help to have a sort of preview, you could just do this with requires. Because requires extends is sort of the permissionless version already. The supersession part is probably the spicier part. And there I was trying to think of the permissionless semantics, and all I could come up with was like forks, because a fork is assumed to be a permissionless upgrade. Like you can join us or not join us, but there's no sort of authority calling this the one upgrade. But maybe that's an
interesting choice of words.
Inflammatory choice of words, perhaps. But like the hard fork schedules, right? Like it's an upgrade cycle. I don't know. Supersession only really works in like an IETF case where there's an external authority saying this definitively supersedes this. But a fork is sort of like, it could be superseding or it could not. It depends on it's decentralized.
Yeah, like, I think the prime example here is like 223 in ERC20. Daxaran who wants to like rip out approvals. I think, he considers that to be a superseding EIP, where I would consider it not to be superseding and it to be like impeding, I guess. So I'm not exactly sure what. Yeah.
we have a word for that already. It's a hard fork.
I mean, I would suggest that we should not complicate things any further than it is actually required. If we give a look at the present list of EIPs, even on the simplest website, eips.ethereum.org, it is not difficult to find ERC20 related proposal. If people want to have extension, they can go ahead and do that. But is it really necessary to the new proposal could be considered as superseding? Do we really think there is any advantage of doing it? Yeah.
Supersede could be useful, for example, in core EIP. I mean, because there is some superseding that does happen, and it is very clear that okay, this proposal supersedes and has been accepted and has moved into final. So
well,
I agree. It totally makes sense over there.
Yeah, maybe we can, by a working group, have these tags, whether it supersede is acceptable in this working group or not. I mean, maybe we can do that.
I feel like in the case of application standard, it is not for the governance member to decide on that, because application proposals are for different applications. Some may need the older version and some may need the newer version of them. It could be on their organization, if they want to have like upgrade their proposal, and they can say, okay, fine, we have upgraded and now new proposal is superseding that. In my mind, it is not adding too much value to the list of standards, especially for application. I can totally understand it makes sense for the core proposals.
Mm,
I think
But I mean, the
core
way I
proposals are the ones that need it the least, though, because core proposals don't go final until they're on mainnet, so you can just update the proposal until it's published. Whereas ERCs, somebody will finalize it, and then, like in the case of what is it, 1271, they find a security problem, and then they want to update their EIP. Well, like they don't want to come up with a new number because it's going to be mostly compatible, except for a little note they want to add. So I think core EIPs don't need supersedes nearly as much as ERCs do.
and
In certain cases, we have seen examples of like, one proposal, I think, which was in the past upgrade, now get a better version. I mean, like the better proposal, and we move on that on the code. We just know by the latest list of proposal for the latest upgrade, and we move forward from there. Yeah.
but we just know is exactly the thing that's a problem for casual observers or first timers, or there's sort of an information asymmetry there. I think that the distinction here is like all core devs just know because there's an external authority marking things as archived elsewhere. And once an ERC goes final, there's no way to know or notice that it's archived. Like you can only withdraw something if it didn't go to final. When something goes to final, it can only be forked permissionlessly because there is no mainnet runtime to tell you that a final ERC is no longer relevant or that the momentum has moved to another fork. I don't know. I feel like that. I feel like the arguments I'm hearing actually sort of cut both ways. And in a way, the just linking to things that claim to fork something permissionlessly is almost like the most you can do without changing the rules for final status. Like if you don't want to change status, but you do want to give final ERCs a way to be somehow marked as archival externally, I don't know. It's just my thought.
I mean, so superseding is something that, for example, can be part of the base ERC, which is being superseded. I mean, if that author is agreeing that this is being superseded by some particular other standard, then we can actually allow a superseding tag directly in that particular ERC, which basically author is agreeing to. So there is a definitive authority who has earlier authored a particular ERC and is now conceding that this is being superseded or it has security issues or whatever and should be superseded by this particular ERC. So maybe
I actually proposed
that.
that earlier, but I was told that front matter can't change after something goes final.
Yeah, that's my position. So once the document goes final, you can't change it. Well, it's not that you can't change it. It's that
I mean,
we don't want to defer to the author as the authority of deciding whether or not we can change it.
No, instead of allowing basically the author to change segments to it, he can just add that this is superseded by this particular ERC, for example. I mean, that is the
Right.
only change we can allow.
So my problem with that is once a proposal becomes final, it's kind of gifted to the community, right? So the entire ecosystem decides whether or not it's been superseded, not just the author. Like, sure, the author has, permission to change it all the way up until final. Well, I guess last call technically, but then once it goes final, it's like this is done. Anybody can use it. And then okay, maybe an example is better. It's kind of hard to explain my feelings on this. So Imagine, a malicious author writes an EIP that contains a security vulnerability, and they write it all out. They know about the security vulnerability, or maybe even not a security vulnerability. Let's say a inefficiency or a bad API design, and they convince the rest of the ecosystem to implement their standard. Well, secretly, they're implementing the next version of their standard that's significantly better. And then they release that after everybody's wasted a whole bunch of time implementing the first version of their standard. So they have this leg up on the rest of the competition because they convince everybody badly, and then they release the better version later on. And I mean, supersedes and labeling it in the EIP doesn't really stop them from doing that. But I'd rather not give authors the ultimate power to modify their EIP.
In the internet standards, superseded makes sense because it basically means this is the way we did it in the past, and you should stop doing it that way, because if you do, you're going to fall off the network. Everyone's going to do it this new way now. For the typical ERC, that doesn't make any sense. People can do whatever they want. So in the absence, I think in the absence of a working group that's actually taking responsibility for these things so that they can make such recommendations, no, there's no one thing can't supersede another, except that the community can recognize that, oh, ERC20 is broken in certain ways, and here's a new proposal that's better. And so the community sort of on its own either keeps using ERC20 anyway or uses the better one.
But sorry, but I completely agree. But the distinction there is between a centralized protocol and a decentralized protocol, because if you can only be on one version or the other, like you say, if you fall off the network doing it the other way, then that's a fork.
Yes.
It can't be a supersession, because there isn't one network that decided unilaterally that we're all going to fork. So there can only be a sort of opt-in, opt-out fork. But if you want to signal you either do the older way or the new way, we need some semantic other than supersession. And I lead more and more towards fork, because the new EIP is telling someone do it this way instead of that way to switch from that network to this network.
Another term is deprecated. In the case of core, the criteria, the criteria used to be that it's basically final once it's on the mainnet. And the core developers they can set up their workflow however they like, and even when they didn't have their own workflow, we can't prevent the core developers from grabbing something from any stage of the EIP process, or even something that's not an EIP, and deciding that they are going to include it in an upgrade. And then ex post facto, it would be really good to have an EIP describing what happened. But typically there is an EIP, and it will need to describe what's actually on mainnet, and that becomes the final EIP. And if any discrepancies show up, the discrepancies are that the EIP does not describe the mainnet, because the mainnet's running. The mainnet is the source of truth, not the EIP. And at that point, I think you need errata to the original EIP rather than new EIP. Way confusing to have a new EIP that supersedes the old EIP that people implemented onto the mainnet. This would happen if everybody if everybody did it differently than EIP, and it's running on the network, and it's, there's consensus. And I'll stop talking. Because I'm trying to say something simple and I'm going on and on.
Actually, it's slide number 21. So I have just shared a presentation that we had a few years ago. I wanted to let people know here that superseded was actually a status a few years ago. But when we tried to kind of simplify the process or unify the process for all core and non-core proposal, this was dropped. I am aware that there was at least one proposal which was into final, and in the next upgrade it was superseded by another core proposal. So we used this status, but it was dropped and we decided to move on with final only. So if we want to bring it back, like considering there are use cases of that can be definitely be under consideration, and we can start discussing that. But about this particular call for input, do we really have a case to back it up? Why are we proposing this at this point of time, except for ERC 20?
1271.
Okay.
So there's a security problem in it, and it is a like
Mhm.
inarguable, legitimate security problem, and they want to update it with that security consideration.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand why are we treating it different than ERC 20? The author of ERC 223 also claimed that there was some issue with ERC 20 that led to a lot of hacks. Then the author potentially went ahead and wrote another proposal. Can't we do the similar thing with 1271?
Sorry, could you ask the question again?
So my question here is like the solution that we shared with respect to ERC 20, and the author went ahead with the new proposal and kind of educating the community that this new proposal is going to overcome the issue which were there with ERC 20 that may have led to certain loss of funds.
Oh, yeah, okay. You're talking about like 223, right? Yeah.
Yes. So can't we suggest the same thing for 1271? I mean, if an organization, if a project found that this particular proposal has some security issue, they can perhaps come up with a new proposal and upgrade their project to that proposal. Is there any specific reason that we need to stick with 1271 as the number that has been implemented in that project?
It's not that they want to stick with 1271. I mean, they do want to stick with 1271. Their preferred solution is updating it. But I think what they're willing to accept as like a compromise is if we have a link on 1271 to the replacement.
I mean, that is an additional ask, and that's really kind of them that they want the community to know about it. But I understand there are other ways that can help that particular project and perhaps the community without making a lot of changes in the current process. I think we already have one or two call for input on 1271 case specifically, or do we want to have maybe one final round of call for input to decide on this particular issue that can or cannot we include the superseded part in a final proposal? I think at this point, we can definitely wait till 7th of February to see what other people think about it. And based on the response that we collect, it can be decided. All right. Is there any other final comment or thought that people would like to add for this particular call for input?
I think we're good to move on. I think.
Yeah, so there's another one, 308.
Sure. So this is a final EIP where the existing authors want to add a new author to the author list after it's been finalized.
Which they would,
Comes down.
sorry, they would probably do that if that person was an author all along, but wasn't. Their authorship was not acknowledged when it should have been. Is that what you
Yeah.
mean?
Exactly.
Errata.
I mean, as I have commented on that issue as well, I mean, authorship is not same as the credits for the EIP. So I don't see why we should allow any change over there now, since it doesn't need any maintenance.
I'm not understanding. For us, I think authorship is just literally that you contributed to the EIP. Either.
So it's both permission to modify the EIP and a list of people who contributed.
So in my understanding, it does not reflect credits to the EIP in the sense that the people who contributed to the EIP, because I mean, I don't know, the crediting and saying that, okay, we picked our idea from here, these are the inspirations, all that is a messy stuff. I see author of the EIP as a people who would want to make edits to it or edit it or basically maintain it. But since it's final and it doesn't need any maintenance, I don't see why should there be another author to it, in the sense that it is also a retrospective step, right? If the contribution was meaningful at that particular time at which the EIP was written, there would definitely be a mention. So in retrospect, editing of the authorship, I actually don't see what basically the benefit to the community is and why it should be allowed, because it doesn't serve any purpose.
If nothing else, it serves a purpose in the resume of the person who should have been recognized as an author and wasn't.
But it opens a Pandora box to other people who will say that, okay, people who might bribe author of well-known EIPs to get their name inside and to pump up their resume. I mean, we are not there for people to pump their resume, right? So I actually feel that, I mean I don't strongly feel, but I think that we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Of course, we're worrying about something that's never happened. What has
I
happened?
think this is the first case where we have received this request to maybe update an author after it is being finalized. Otherwise, historically, we have seen authors being added, whoever may have implemented those proposals on respective client or may have contributed significantly as co-author of the proposal.
What has happened is proposals where one of the authors no longer supports the proposal. And currently that person remains an author because of their contribution. And in one case, did not want to be removed as an author, even though they were very much against the proposal. So,
Very well, Greg, and any other editor who may not have added their comment, if you would like to maybe add your comment. towards this issue, it would be really helpful making decision by the end of the deadline here. And we are 4 minutes past time. I quickly wanted to maybe mention about issue number 291 and 293. I think the deadline for these two call for inputs have already passed. Do we plan to extend the deadline, or are we good to close them?
I'll close them. I think they've been open long enough.
Okay, perfect. And I think I have repeated item number 3, my bad. So we can perhaps skip that part, quickly getting into the EIPS Insight, because today is also the 31st of January, which is the last day for this month. So if we take a quick look at the EIPS Insight, we have 2 final proposals on EIPS repository, one in ERC and one in RIP. So this is the first proposal which moved to the final status for RIP. And we have 9 proposals added to ERC repository in the month of January, and 2 proposals on EIPS repository have been moved to the stagnant status. The detailed list can be found on the links added to the agenda, and people can also refer to eipsinsight.com. One other question that I want to ask this group quickly before concluding the meeting for today is the time for the next meeting. It seemed in the another group chat, the Discord channel, that there could be further discussion of the alternate time. Do we want to stick with this 1730 UTC, or we want to go back to 14 and 1500, because UF and ETHJS team meeting are at 1600 till 1730. Okay,
I think
yeah,
we
please go
need
ahead, Sam.
to ask Matt what his preferred time slots are.
Sam, I think I overspoke you. You were saying something?
I was just going to ask, my audio cut out for a second. I didn't hear the times.
Okay, I was mentioning about going back to the original time, 1400 or 1500, because the later half is like filled with other meetings. One is EUF meeting at 1600, and ETHJS meeting is there from 16 to 1730. So we can either start at 1730 or we can go back to 14 or 1500.
I think I'm okay with any of those.
It seems most of the participants of this call are definitely okay with 1730 UTC. But as I have mentioned in the Discord channel of ETH R&D, let's hear from people if they would like to maybe change it to 14 or 1500. But if we do not receive much of the response in support of either of time slot, then we will continue to have it at 1730 UTC. All right, I think we have covered to most of the agenda item today. Is there anything else people would like to quickly mention? In that case, thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Sam and Gajendra, for running the last meeting. It was a quick one. I really hope that you guys run the meeting so it becomes way quicker. All right. Hope to see you all in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Yes, bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.